Welcome to Rauta's zine review. This time we go to one of the classic ones from Norway, Imhotep, a zine that has been here for seems like eternity now. Now, very sporadic in terms of issues coming out, but always full of wisdom and interesting interviews and all. And this one is no exception. Now, in terms of the release, the publication, this is a 4, something like that. And it seems like a typical zine. When you however count it, the fact, this is quite thick, 110 pages, it actually has as much stuff to read as a typical book. I mean, assuming you have your pocketbook, putting this amount of information of these 110 pages, you would have roughly, I guess, something like 200, 300 pages as a book. So what make it look like a zine that is easy to digest, some 50 pages and all blah, blah, blah. Well, it might come as a surprise that this is indeed way more worth reading. And this comes with a kind of a very minimal cover, and here are the actual ingredients. Dead Spell Omega from France, the legendary black metal act that hasn't been doing many interviews at all, like 3. Cult Never Dies, the publication company, which is more than just that. Heathen Deity, Dissection, Vatine, Mare. Now, one name in particular might pop up as why, and that is Dissection, the band that ceased to exist for almost like 20 years ago. Not exactly that long time. Well, yeah, give and take. I mean, time really flies. But this is more like taking you back to the age when Jon Nødtved was out of prison, making third album, Rain Chaos and all. So it's kind of a throwback thing. Feels a little bit weird in the terms of like how zines are, I guess people imagine, being more up to date. But then again, why would they have to? Especially that nowadays information is all online, including videos, but obviously not limited to videos, text and all. So everything is very much of today, except zines, which don't really have to give a fuck. So in that sense, it has a lot of place. Also, a very interesting article is about Vatine, because that was done in like 3 different eras or places. So it's putting together different times into one interesting article or interview. And then Mare, which is a very peculiar, almost mysterious name from Norway. Heathen Deity, interesting one, but I would say these 3, Dead Spell Omega, Cult Never Dies, and Vatine are the best ones, the most interesting ones. No disrespect towards the other bands, but for example, Dissection's information is just something that is not very relevant when you see the questions nowadays. The interview itself is fine, but like I said, certain things are just being known, and certain questions don't anyway feel like they're resonating that much with the given days. But obviously, makes no sense if I'm just talking to you rather than not showing you. Comes with selected few ads here, like on the background. You will see this is done with Cult Never Dies. This is filled with these kind of big photos and interesting layouts. Some of them are more the classic sense, and there are lots of big photos or drawn images which make sense. Especially this Dead Spell Omega article is very interesting. Starts here, and the first one is more like ponderings. It's almost like essay of things. Goes for a lot of words here, and then there's this article, The Wound of God, Evil and Sacred in the Work of Dead Spell Omega. And these are not just made by one person, but more. These ponderings between the original essay kind of writings and the interview itself, it can get really philosophical, but I'll be honest with you, it was a little bit of a drag, because, I mean, there is sometimes these things that they're really important to you as a fan, as someone who is ready to explain what's going on in your mind and heart and all that stuff, that things that define your life. But as a reader, it might be really like, okay, that's a little bit too much. Go for the TED Talk if you want to do it for 20 minutes. But like I said, then there's this very, very fascinating interview with, drawings and all that stuff. And this is lengthy as fuck. So very rewarding for those like me who are ready to explore what Dead Spell Omega is all about. I was very, very fascinated by the answers, because they are not short and sweet like, hey, you made a new album, what do you think about it? Yeah, it's great, move on. more like going in depth with this stuff. So it was fantastic to read all about it, especially when the band still remains very mysterious despite lengthy answers. And one thing that really made me like the band even more is obviously the very fact that, there's no feeling of being poser or try hard or anything like that. You don't need to fill, the answers with some evil wordings and all that stuff, but you can just go smart and active, actually interested person about the given answers and questions and all, which makes it fantastic read. I'd rather enjoy person who is nice and all that stuff, with being smart, intelligent, reactive and all that stuff, even if it felt like this is not so evil as black metal is supposed to be. Fuck that. I mean, we're not guys in our 20s anymore. And besides, being intelligent, smart, and then evil or anti-human, nihilist, whatever, is way more dangerous and interesting than reading someone whose level of being evil or dark or anti-establishment is like throwing the bottles against some government building, if you get my drift. Arsoning? Well, let's not go into that. So, like I said, then there is this dissection interview, which is also quite lengthy, with a couple of miniature size reviews, a little bit on the Somber Lane, a little bit on the Storm of the Lightspan, and finally a little bit lengthier one on the Rain Chaos. They are nice added features here, but I guess by this point everybody has their own opinion and feel what their albums are like. So, like I said, this is a little bit of feeling outdated because it was done when Jon Nødtveit, now dead, when he got out of prison, and that was the stuff of like that. So it's kind of like, hey, going back to some 20 years in terms of zine and all. Then you have this Heathen Deity stuff, which is, once again, an interesting, well-composed interview, but maybe kind of a pales in shadow with the other bands. Mare, on the other hand, is something that kind of divides my, opinion in two. I would say the interview itself, it's interesting, but I get a little bit of this vibe, like maybe they are trying so hard, or maybe I just get the feeling because, the That's Below Me guys, just more interesting and more intelligence in that sense. And of course there are some other articles. There's like this thing from Gromf, a band that has totally escaped my radar during the years. This is pretty interesting because they kind of go through their process of the music. And while I'm not big fan of music interviews which are just about the music, look how you compose this, what kind of cables you use, what pedals, amplifiers, guitar brands, guitar picks, whatever drumsticks you use, I'm like, oh no, I don't want to read about it. But this was actually fantastic, first and foremost because Roy K, the man behind Imhotep, the boss, but not the only writer, has written lyrics for that. So it makes a sense because it's kind of an interesting collaboration thing, and that brings this interview in a whole different level in that sense. There is this twist almost. Here is Mr. Man. Look, handsome, nice Norwegian metalhead with a weird sense of humor. Then again, who I am to say about weird sense of humor being weird Finnish baldhead and all. Then there are reviews. Now, while the reviews are actually nicely written, some of them are longer than others. Some go very surface level, you could even say, and by not negative ways, but you would say some of them are quite shallow, barely mentioning anything about the music itself. They are sometimes nicely worded. There's a little bit of this dry humor about the given music and all, but sometimes it also feels like when this kind of zine isn't exactly the most, like coming out in timely fashion, meaning when it comes out, the information is already like, you're talking about some older albums. Then again, personally, I don't mind. I mean, it can be as fascinating to read about some 20 or 30 years of an album as much as the album that came out yesterday. But for people who are looking more relevant, like about this day, these might feel a little bit outdated. Nothing wrong with, zine written reviews, but in a way, when these are kind of competing against nowadays online journalism or reviews for that matter, maybe these are the least interesting stuff on these pages, because you could have one more interview in this one. I'm not complaining as such, don't take it like that, but I'm just saying maybe zine's best sides, the forte, is not with the reviews, because, reviews barely seem to interest no people at all. I read them still, but it's not because I kind of need them. I just want to read because I want to understand how other people perceive certain releases and all that stuff. I don't know if that makes sense, but just saying, with zines, the forte is within articles and the topics discussed. Which brings us to one of my favorite articles on this particular issue, called Never Dies. Dale Patterson, who wrote this fantastic 10 out of 10 book, Black Metal, The Evolution of the Cult, Revised Edition. Why I find personally this very interesting is because I have read the book, made a review out of it, thanks to Dale Patterson and The Cult Never Dies for sending me a copy, by the way. But this article is fantastic because, like I said, I read the book and I enjoyed it vastly. I read every single page. I didn't skip anything. Secondly, I have met Dale Patterson live a couple of times, and we, as such, know one another. So this kind of a mutual interest and I guess mutual respect too. So reading kind of like an interview of a friend in a way makes sense. Done by another friend. So master battery. My point here is you see a lot of band interviews, but you don't see that many interviews when someone writes a book, makes a movie, especially among like metal scene. So I find this more rare and interesting as such than, typical band interview, in sense like this is more a rarity, and once again features some nice photos and takes here and there. And I think if this would be just about the text, no art whatsoever, it would be more boring for the eyes. So these are more pleasing when you actually see stuff like this. A lengthy interview and very rewarding to read. Like I said, with the Deadspell Omega, the best thing. However, I truly like to read this Vatine interview, which was done between 2018 and 22 with some added parts, I think as late as 23 or 24. So lengthy one as well. You can see photos and likes, and also there's featured a person making comments on the album, which was new back then. Meeting Eric of Vatine, myself, and having done a rather lengthy interview with himself, once again, this is like a good addition to that. These are not competing. These are more like complementing one another. And I find Eric very, very interesting person, smart and very passionate about his music and band and lifestyle. So obviously, for me, it was interesting to read now that I have done with my own. I mean, I've read before and I have read afterwards. So all in all, not skipping pages, even though I mentioned the philosophical article was a little bit of not that interesting to me, even though I like philosophy. It's just the article that didn't resonate with me much. But everything else here feels quite golden. So this is the kind of a issue you probably want to read fully, maybe put back into your collection, or I don't know, pass to a friend, depending how you view these kind of articles. At least read them once before you pass it on. Imhotep once again kind of reminds you why it's so important to have these kind of zines, the ones that are well executed and done with passion and knowledge. I mean, no disrespect to guys and gals in their 20s, but with that kind of knowledge and understanding and experience of the whole scene and the bands, you really couldn't do questions like this which go more, deeper. So it kind of requires people in their 40s and 50s to do this kind of a material. I know, for example, Dale Patterson is a little bit younger than me and Roy here, but the point here is, at certain point, you have kind of a gathered and gotten that experience and knowledge, so you can actually write a book or write these zines or make my silly videos. And I'm claiming I have the knowledge and understanding, but at least I know more than my 20 years old version back in the days. So that's all I'm saying. So people who want to get enlightened, older or new ones, these are the kind of stuff you want to read. Obviously, it has only a few interviews, but I'd rather take quality over quantity, meaning I'd rather take a few long ones than a bunch of, shorter ones, which tend to be the more commercial magazine approach. And often those 1-2 page interviews are just barely scratching the surface and then it's gone, moving on to the next band. So rather choose this one over your typical Metal Sucks website interviews. That's all I'm saying. If you got the money, if you got the passion, you will find a way to get this kind of stuff. Look for Cult Never Dies, and you should be able to get your own copy. That's all from now. Should you have questions and comments, let me know. Links are provided in the description box. Off you go. Stay metal.